This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all of a couple of things. The first one being, please do not forget to subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't done so already, you can subscribe to the podcast on whatever website or application, on your phone, on your laptop, or on your, maybe even your watch, and whatever device you're listening to this on that website or application you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Music, Spotify, Podbean, whatever it may be, just go to our channel's main page and just hit subscribe. We would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast. Again, you would want to do that for a couple of reasons, but the main one being you want to get those alerts and those notifications, again, on your phone, on your laptop, or on your watch, so you know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, when we release it, and then you can be one of the first people to listen to a new episode again when we drop it. So please subscribe to the podcast on whatever device you're listening to this on. And again, whether it's Apple Music, Spotify, or like Podbean or something like that, you can just go to our main channel page and hit subscribe from there, and you will get those alerts and notifications. And again, you will know when we drop a new episode, when we release it. Again, please subscribe to the podcast. We'd also really appreciate it if you would leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general if you are enjoying the content and discussion points and just the show overall. It would give us a big boost of confidence and would also let us know that you guys are enjoying everything that we're doing over here at the GSMC Sports Podcast team. Again, it would give us a really big boost of confidence and would just let us know that you guys are enjoying what we're doing over here. If you could leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general, again, on that same app or website you're listening to this on, Spotify, Apple Music, Podbean, you can just go, again, on that main channel page where you should also subscribe. You can see at the bottom, it'll say leave a review or something like that. We would really appreciate it if you would leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general. And finally, don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Over there, you can check out some highlights that we've maybe posted on there and just, some immediate reaction maybe to some James Harden trade talks or live tweeting the Sunday night football game or tonight's game between the Chargers and Raiders. But over there on social media, we would love to just interact with you guys more in general, and social media is the best place to do that, of course, in this new digital era. So again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us, and we would absolutely love it if you can give us a follow on all of those great platforms. Again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can follow us on all of those great social media platforms, and we can interact with you guys more on there as well. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy, healthy, and safe, and hopefully not too snowed in. If you're from the Northeast like me, there's snow up to my window pretty much at this point, so we're snowed in for the next couple of days. But sports continues. The NBA season is under a week away at this point. It's about 5 days away. December 22nd, when you're listening to this, is when the NBA season kicks off. We're in the middle of NFL playoff races in both the AFC and NFC, so we have another absolutely fantastic show for you all today. In a couple of moments, I want to give you an update on where things stand with the James Harden trade rumors. There's been some rumors of what Philadelphia is offering. There's been some rumors that maybe Miami is in there more than we think, and there could be some other surprise teams in there that could be in the James Harden sweepstakes. I want to give you a team that I think should go really after James Harden, as sort of the Heat and 76ers sort of struggled to get a good enough trade package. I think there's a team that should really go after him. Also later on in the show, I want to tell you what do I think the New England Patriots should do this offseason. I don't think there's maybe a more interesting team going into this offseason than New England. Should they keep Cam? Should they draft a guy? Should they trade for somebody? What should they do with their tons of cap space they're going to have? So I'm going to play the role of Bill Belichick later on in the show and tell you what I would do if I were the New England Patriots moving forward. So we'll go that later on in the show. Also, I want to talk about and rank actually the head coaching opportunities going into next year for the NFL season. I know it's sort of in the future, but out of all the teams that will be looking for a new head coach / GM next year, I want to tell you which jobs are the best and why. We'll get into that later on in the show. And also, I like to do this every week right before the week kicks off. The top 10 NFL teams, that's always ever-changing. I'll be giving you my updated top 10 team list later on in the show, probably at the end of the show as well. And I'll give you my predictions for tonight's huge Thursday night game between the Chargers and Raiders. The season's essentially on the line for John Gruden and the Raiders. I'll give you my prediction and why also at the very end of the episode. So again, a very, very packed show. And we're going to start off with the updates on James Harden. So, as you all know, James Harden has demanded a trade out of Houston. He was late to training camp. Ever since, really, actually before the Russell Westbrook trade, when they traded him to the Wizards for John Wall, there have been rumors that James Harden has wanted out. I think it's being increasingly more stressful / not great for the Houston locker room as this goes on, farther and farther. They can say everything they want, that they're willing to, go, be uncomfortable, and they will head into the season with Harden and all that. But at the end of the day, the Rockets know that James Harden doesn't want to be there, and his, body language during their preseason game was not great. He did a bunch of, a couple media questions after the game where he seemed disengaged and really looked fed up, to be quite honest with you. He doesn't want to be in Houston, and I think this trade is happening sooner rather than later. I think it's a two-team race between Philadelphia and Miami. I think Brooklyn is out of the picture, but it appears that trade talks with both Philadelphia and Miami have sort of stalled a little bit. I'll get to the Philadelphia side first and then the Miami side. So for Philadelphia, the big question has always been, is Ben Simmons available in trade talks? Well, today both Woj and Shams have come out and said, and I think Ramona Shelburne as well, I want to give her credit as well, that Ben Simmons has been made available in a couple of trade scenarios for James Harden. I think what the Rockets would like is Ben Simmons and probably draft compensation, and I don't think Philadelphia is willing to do that. Now, while that report did come out that Ben Simmons has been made available in some trade discussions, not all, just some trade packages with Houston, both Shams and Woj have said that conversations are pretty much dead right now. They're not talking, they have not gone anywhere, and they are nowhere close to a deal. And on top of all that, Daryl Morey literally came out about 15 minutes ago when I'm recording this and said Ben Simmons is not being traded, quote unquote. We're not trading Ben Simmons. He is a large part of our future going forward. Now, GMs say this all the time, and I think Morey might have said something in particular maybe when he was in Houston when they traded, Chris Paul. But to come out in there and say publicly that we are not trading Ben Simmons, a young piece going forward, is an interesting move to say the least. I don't want to say Philadelphia is out of it and that Ben Simmons won't get traded, but that was a very clear and concise, he wasn't even asked about it. It wasn't like he said it in a media session. Again, when I'm recording this, it's at night, there's no media availability, and that's when the report came out. And within 30 minutes of the report, Morey came out and said, without prompted to by the media or anything, that they're not trading Ben Simmons. So this actually really does make me believe Ben Simmons is not on the table. Now, Philadelphia, I think, is the team that makes the most sense for James Harden besides Miami and Brooklyn, because of both sides. I think no team in contention in both the East or West could use James Harden more than the Philadelphia 76ers. The Nets are obviously set with KD and Kyrie, and while the Heat are probably either the favorites or co-favorites to land James Harden, and Pat Riley is always looking for a big fish, they don't necessarily need him. They just made the finals without him last year, and they brought back a majority of their roster, addressed their biggest need, which is point of attack defense. They added Avery Bradley, drafted Precious Achua, who will be a big man off the bench for defensive presence and rebounding as well. So they addressed all their needs, and of course they're only going to get better because Bam and Hero are going to get better. And they're in trade discussions as well, and I'll get to them in a minute. But I don't think any team could use James Harden more than Philadelphia. And I personally would be including Ben Simmons in any and all trade packages. I probably also would give them some trade compensation now. There was a rumor that it was Ben Simmons and 3 first-round picks. I don't know if I would do that. But Ben Simmons and a first, maybe even 2 firsts, I would definitely consider. Because, again, at the end of the day, if you have Doc Rivers, the head coach, and you have a pick-and-roll offense centered around Joel Embiid, who's maybe the best center in the league. I would argue Anthony Davis, but he could also be considered a power forward, so it depends on how you look at him. At the end of the day, I really do think, though, Joel Embiid's a top 3 center in this league, if not the number 1 center in the league, and I think James Harden's probably the best scoring guard in the league, and some people would argue he's the best pure scoring guard in league history. I'd argue Michael Jordan, but that's something that's clearly up for debate. Again, James Harden is averaging at least 33 points a game the last 3 years. He's averaging at least 25 the last 8 seasons. He's a high-value player. This isn't somebody like a Drew Holiday who, Milwaukee traded for, or even a Russell Westbrook who Houston traded for, and then eventually Washington traded for as well. James Harden is a perennial MVP candidate. He's probably going to lead the scoring again next year and for the foreseeable future, unless a guy like Trae Young or Luka Doncic, I think, are the only 2 guys that could maybe catch them or catch Harden in regards to scoring titles. So I would be willing to give up Simmons and picks. Again, an offense centered around Joel Embiid and James Harden, I think, would put you top 3, 4 in the East. And I think you could certainly make the argument that Philadelphia could come out of the East with, a 2-man game like that. And again, it would make a lot of sense. This is a new era in Philadelphia. There's no more Brett Brown. It's a new era with Daryl Morey, and Elton Brand is obviously still there, but Daryl Morey is really the head of everything basketball operations-wise, and then Doc Rivers is a new coach. So the new guys who have come in have no ties to Ben Simmons. They did not draft Ben Simmons. Now, it has been clear that Morey does like Simmons, and again, wants to hang on to him, and like I just mentioned, within 30 minutes of that Shams and Woj report, that Simmons has been made available in some trade talks, not even all trade talks, just some, maybe even lightly, maybe just his name being thrown around. Morey came out and said publicly, I think via Twitter and via Shams as well, that he is not trading Ben Simmons. And again, when a GM comes out there that firm, and if he ends up trading Simmons, he's going to have questions to answer for that, and that would ruin his credibility with some of his players. He wouldn't necessarily like him going behind their back like that, and I don't think that'd be great for the locker room. So there was no reason, again, for Morey to come out and say this. He didn't have a press conference he had to do. He didn't have to talk to the media. He didn't have to release a statement. So he did this unprompted on his own terms, which is another interesting factor. Again, I think Philadelphia and Miami are the 2 frontrunners for this. If I had to tell you where I think he would go as of right now, this moment, I would say Miami, which is who I'm going to talk about in a second here, but I think Philadelphia could use him more. I don't think the Miami Heat are desperate to add James Harden. I think they view him as a luxury, and if they can get him at the right price, they will. I think Philadelphia should be viewing this more from a desperate sense of, wow, Brooklyn got a lot better, and Milwaukee definitely overpaid for Drew Holiday, but at the end of the day, their roster got better. Miami's roster got better by adding Avery Bradley and a couple of other guys like Mo Harkless, and you already know Hero and Bam are going to take another step. And then you also look down. Boston, Tatum's only going to get better. Jaylen Brown's young. He's only going to get better. They added Jeff Teague off the bench. They're trying to boost her up their bench as well. So you have to really look at it if you're Philadelphia. Is how close are you to the Miamis, the Brooklyns, the Milwaukees, the Bostons, maybe even the Torontos right now? And while you do probably love Doc Rivers as your new head coach and Daryl Morey as your president of basketball operations or general manager, and the Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid thing has been going okay, we all know that it's not a perfect fit, and we all know that they've been struggling with it for years, and this isn't the first time where people have suggested splitting the 2 up. And again, I've told you multiple times that if I were in charge of the Philadelphia 76ers, I would absolutely break up the duo. Now, if you want to argue you should keep Simmons and not, Embiid because of age and future, whatever. But I definitely think that, if you're Philadelphia, you should include Ben Simmons in any trade value. And if I was Philadelphia, I would have already gotten this deal done by now. Again, a 2-man game of Harden and Joel Embiid. That's a tough. That's traditionally a great big man and a great guard together succeed in the NBA. LeBron's not a guard, but he sort of plays like it. They work out. Kareem and Magic, they worked out, right? This is how the NBA works. Traditionally, a good guard and a good big man get things done in the NBA. So if you're Philadelphia, you have to be willing to potentially include a guy like Ben Simmons. I understand that he's, maybe a fan favorite and whatever. He's the future. He's super young. I think he's only 25 years old, and he's an all-NBA caliber defensive player, and he's really, really good in the paint and in transition. Maybe nobody's better besides LeBron James and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I understand all that, but at the end of the day, James Harden, again, has averaged at least 25 points a game the last 8 seasons, and he's averaging 30 points a game the last 3, and he's a perennial MVP candidate, and he wants to play in Philadelphia. He also wants to play in Brooklyn or Miami, but Philadelphia is definitely one of the places he would consider playing for. You have to consider it if you're Daryl Morey. I don't know how I feel about him publicly coming out and saying that he's not trading Ben Simmons. It's hard to go out there, again, within 30 minutes of a report and say all this. I mean, it's gonna be tough to answer those questions, even if they do get James Harden, and everybody will be thrilled. Those are the types of questions that will be asked: is why did you make a public statement saying you're not trading your 25-year-old young, maybe superstar in the making, things like that. So it's going to be interesting. On the flip side of this, the Miami Heat. Now, there were rumors initially that they weren't willing to include Tyler Hero. I think those have sort of been debunked, and now they're not necessarily debunked, but maybe things changed in the Heat sense. It looks like Tyler Hero is available for trade in a James Harden package. According to Ethan J. Skolnick, who runs 5 Reasons Sports down local in Miami, they have been also saying that they're not willing necessarily, or they don't want to, involve both Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, and that seems to be a huge point for both Miami and Houston right now. If I were Houston, I would want both of those guys, surround John Wall, Boogie Cousins with great shooters like Hero and Duncan Robinson, 2 guys who can only get better in my opinion, both defensively and with their off the dribble game and things like that. Tyler Hero has looked really, really good with the ball in his hands right now in preseason for Miami. But again, I don't think Miami is as desperate as, a team like Philadelphia is for a guy like this, because again, they made a finals run last year. But at the end of the day, maybe I'm higher on James Harden than most. I would absolutely involve both Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero. Both great players. Both of them were absolutely huge parts in why you made a finals run last year. But can you imagine if the Miami Heat ran out there with a starting lineup of James Harden at the 1, Avery Bradley at the 2, Jimmy Butler at the 3, probably Maurice Harkless at the 4, and Bam Adebayo at the 5, you have maybe the best all-around offensive pure scorer in the league. The best pure scorer in the league is James Harden. He averages the most points. He hits the most threes. He's everything, right? So you have the best, arguably, offensive player in the league from a pure scoring standpoint, and you get him 30 points a game on the other end, and then the other team has to go and try and score on Mo Harkless, Avery Bradley, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo. I mean, Avery Bradley, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo are world-renowned defenders. I think Bam Adebayo is going to be a perennial defensive player of the year candidate his entire career. We know what Jimmy Butler does on the defensive end of the floor, and we know what Avery Bradley does at the other end of the floor. This would be the best team James Harden has ever played with, the best defensive team James Harden has ever played with. And again, while, the argument might be, look at all the shooting you're missing with Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, you're shipping them out, how are you going to recuperate for all that shooting? James Harden is a shooter. He is a pure, absolute sniper, sharpshooter that can score in every which way, but primarily in the three-point ball. So he will make up for the shooting that Duncan Robinson and Hero will tend then, eventually take to Houston. But a team I want to mention right now, because it does appear that these talks have stalled on both ends. Philadelphia is iffy about including Ben Simmons and draft compensation. Miami's holding out hope they don't have to give up a Hero and Duncan Robinson, and probably weighing in general if Harden will even fit their culture. This would be the perfect time for a team to swoop in, give the Godfather offer or something to Houston, and so they can finally just get James out of town. And I'm sure Houston doesn't necessarily want to give James Harden what he wants by trading him to a contender. 2 teams I think could make a move: the Chicago Bulls, the New York Knicks. Both of those teams, historically great franchises, looking for a spark to get back on the map. I think New York would be a better fit than maybe a team like Chicago. But again, Chicago, you could throw in a guy like Kobe White, maybe Zach LaVine, maybe some of the other young guys you've drafted, and draft compensation, get James Harden to Chicago, put the Bulls back on the map, sell out arenas once COVID is over. And again, the Bulls eventually become this place where people want to go. People want to play with James Harden. And Harden in a big city, Chicago, would sell a lot of tickets as well. Same argument with New York. Throw in a guy like RJ Barrett, maybe or maybe not, some of their young players, and picks. Not necessarily all of those in a single trade offer. I can't give you a mock offer. But there would be a way for maybe one of those 2 teams to go after them. Again, would Harden want to sign an extension there? Who knows? But if the New York Knicks got James Harden, they immediately become a playoff contender in the Eastern Conference. That's how much value James Harden brings offensively. Will it happen? I doubt it, but I think, again, a 2-team race between Philadelphia and Miami, and I think it's just whoever caves first. Will Miami cave first and be willing to give up Hero, Duncan Robinson, draft compensation, maybe Precious Achiuwa as well thrown in there? Or will Philadelphia be willing to include Ben Simmons and 3 first-round picks or 2 first-round picks or something like that, Matthias Thybulle as well? I think at the end of the day, it's going to be whoever caves first out of the 3 teams involved. Whether Philly caves first with Simmons and the picks, Miami caves first with Hero or Duncan Robinson, or maybe Houston finally caves because it's so uncomfortable to have James Harden in the locker room, not sounding great, in those press conferences, not bashing the organization necessarily, but definitely not doing them any favors, and having poor body language on the court. Again, we've seen what happens when a player sort of lingers at a team he doesn't want to be. Jimmy Butler was booed in Minnesota at a home game. Those are things you don't want happening if you're, a professionally run basketball organization. I think Harden's out of here sooner rather than later. If I had to put money on it, I would say Miami, but don't be surprised if Philadelphia caves first, or we could maybe see a surprise team like Denver, the Knicks, Chicago swoop in and try to get their teams back on the map. That's going to do it for this segment. Let me know what you guys think of James Harden's situation. Where do you think he should go? Where do you think he will go? And if Miami or Philadelphia got James Harden, would that put them at championship contenders? I think if Miami got Harden, I'd put them as the East favorites. If Philadelphia did, I think they'd have to be up there as well. You'd have to consider it. Again, Joel Embiid and James Harden two-man game would be pretty OP. So let me know what you guys think about the whole James Harden situation and what sort of package do you think Houston should be asking for. Again, they don't have a lot of leverage here, but if you're Miami, will you be willing to give up Hero and Robinson? And again, if you're Philadelphia, do you want to give up Simmons and picks? Those are the tough questions that these teams and organizations have to make, and that's why these GMs get paid the big bucks. Again, that's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this short break, I want to play a little bit of mock GM with the New England Patriots. What do I think they should do going forward in the future at the quarterback position with all of their cap space? And also later on in the show, I do want to give you my top 10 NFL teams. I also want to tell you who I have in tonight's game between the Chargers and the Raiders and why. And if we have time, I do want to talk about some of these head coaching vacancies and what job do I think is the best for a guy like Eric Bieniemy to take, or some of these other guys who are going to be available on the head coaching market. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking everything James Harden. Again, I really do believe it's a two-team race between the Heat and the Philadelphia 76ers. I think the Heat are more willing to cave on some of their assets than Philadelphia is, mostly because I think Pat Riley is always in that win-now mode, and quite frankly, isn't going to be there really for the future of the Heat. He's up there in age, and again, he just wants one more championship, and then he's going to retire off the coast of Malibu. So again, he's not necessarily worried about the future maybe as much as Daryl Morey and Elton Brandar, who might be with Philadelphia the next 5, 7, 10 years. You know, if the Heat win a championship this year, I don't even think Pat Riley would be back with the Heat organization the following year. So I think he is more likely to cave on some of these assets than maybe Philadelphia is. I want to transition now quickly for a little bit here. Something I was been thinking about is I was trying to think about who are the most interesting teams going into the next NFL offseason. Obviously, we're in the thick of the playoff race right now. Everyone's going to talk about that. But I was really thinking about next season a little bit here. And again, I want to also talk about at least a little bit some of the head coaching opportunities. But is there a more interesting team right now heading into this season, or next season really, and also the offseason, than the New England Patriots? It's been such a weird year for the New England Patriots. They led the league in players who opted out due to COVID and everything like that, and they obviously had to retool everything, and their year isn't going as well as maybe some Patriots fans wanted it to be or things like that. But heading into next season, they are top 5 in the NFL in cap space, top 5 in the NFL in draft capital, and they have a lot of moves they could potentially make. Now, the biggest question for me with the Patriots is, how appealing is it to play for Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots? Obviously, the history there with the 6 championships, obviously that was in the Brady era, but it is a known fact that it is not fun to play for the New England Patriots, and I think everything has to come down to is who is the quarterback. You know Bill Belichick is going to coach that defense to be, at worst, a top 10 defense in the league each and every year. The Patriot defense is always going to be that good each and every year, at least, top 10. But the quarterback and the offense is the real question here. I think Josh McDaniels' job is safe. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if he's hired by another team. Now, I don't think he's having the greatest year this year. I don't love his play calling, but at the end of the day, they don't have a ton of weapons to use, at least effectively, and Cam Newton's arm looks completely shot. If I had to guess right now, I don't think Cam Newton is the starting quarterback for the team next year. Not necessarily that he's done a bad job. He's been a good soldier. He hasn't done anything wrong in the media. On-field body language has been fine. His, media things, every time he makes a mistake, he owns up to it. I don't think it's a leadership thing. Bill Belichick seems to love him and his work ethic, but it wouldn't surprise me if Cam wants a long-term deal. I don't think he would be willing to come back to the Patriots on just a one-year deal. He might want something more long-term. So at the end of the day, it wouldn't surprise me if New England moved off him, maybe drafted a guy like Zach Wilson. I think Trey Lance is a name to keep an eye on. But the guy that I think right now that New England should target is Lions quarterback Matt Stafford. So Matt Stafford, who's obviously the quarterback for the Detroit Lions, like I'm mentioning, has all the accolades statistically and numerically to have a Hall of Fame career and a guy who could potentially be an NFL Hall of Famer one day. The biggest downside on Matt Stafford is he hasn't won anything, literally anything, from playoff games to obviously no Super Bowl championships. He hasn't even really had a deep playoff run. And I think Matt Stafford at the end of this year is going to look at the fact that there's going to be another new head coach and new GM in Cleveland and Detroit, and I think that's at least his fourth or fifth new head coach and GM pairing. And again, I think he's 32 years old. He's going to want to move on and potentially make a chance to at least win some games somewhere else. And I think New England offers the perfect opportunity for him. If you're the New England Patriots, you have to look at your division right now. Sean McDermott looks like an incredible head coach. We already know he's an incredible head coach. They're going to win that division this year. And Josh Allen has pretty much transformed his game from at least a mechanical and accuracy standpoint to one of the better ones in the league. And Josh Allen looks like a guy who could potentially compete for, MVPs some way down the line. That's the Bills in that division. Then you have the Dolphins, who maybe have one of the brightest futures in the entire league. Tua Tagovailoa looks like an emerging superstar as well. They have a ton of cap space, a ton of draft capital, and they're only going to get better as well at the end of the day. And then you have the Jets, who if they actually nail the head coaching hire and get a guy like a Brian Flores or a Sean McDermott or maybe even Jim Harbaugh, somebody like that who can make that type of impact, and obviously they're going to draft Trevor Lawrence, they could look scary in the future as well. So if you're looking at the New England Patriots, you have to sort of realize that they might have the worst quarterback in the division going forward if they hang on to Cam or give it to Stidham or even draft a guy like Zach Wilson or Trey Lance, who I think they're interested in both of those guys. Matt Stafford is a big cap hit, but the Patriots have the money. There's been continuity between the two teams before. Patriot guys have gone to work for the Lions. Maybe they weren't successful, but there's been trades made there before as well. And I think an interesting trade that you could potentially, I at least could potentially see, is one that could trade maybe guard Joe Thuney and maybe a second or third round pick to New England for Matt Stafford. There's been rumors that they could also offer a guy like Gilmore, but I'm not sure New England would be willing to, partner with maybe the best all-around cornerback in the entire league. So I would, if there was a way to get Matt Stafford, that'd be number one on my list if I were the New England Patriots. Again, Thuney and either a first or second round pick. Maybe even a third round pick, honestly, but I would say a second. Bring in a guy like Matt Stafford. He's worked with limited weapons before. He's made big-time throws in this league before. He's had big-time drives in this league before. You give him probably the best defense he's ever had. And also, maybe if you draft the guy high, if you can somehow land a Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Kyle Pitts, the tight end. There's a lot of great weapons in this year's draft. And I would also hand a blank check to Allen Robinson, Kenny Golladay if he doesn't leave the Lions, Chris Godwin, all of these, Juju Smith-Schuster, all of these free agents I'd give a blank check to and try to get them to come play for the New England Patriots. If they can do that, if they can get a guy like Stafford and then surround him with some weapons, that defense is already going to be coached up to top 10. There's a real chance that New England can go from a mediocre team like they are right now to right back into AFC playoff contention. Again, I think Stafford is grossly underrated into today's climate and today's NFL. I think he's better than a lot of people give him credit for. And at the end of the day, if you can find a way to land land a guy like Matt Stafford, who again has made big-time drives, has made big-time throws, has been consistently, top 10 statistically in the NFL. Again, I think he has a Hall of Fame career. If you just look at passing yards, passing touchdowns, completion percentage, yards per attempt, all of these things, Matt Stafford has a Hall of Fame statistical career. The one thing he doesn't have, though, is the wins on his resume. Not a lot of playoff wins, if any. No Super Bowls, obviously. No conference championships. That's something New England can offer him. Again, New England's always going to have a top 10 defense, and if you can get him some weapons, there's things like that you could do. Now, I do want to talk about Bill Belichick for a second, because that is the path if he wants to necessarily stay the New England Patriot head coach. I don't think Bill Belichick is leaving, but I want to put my tinfoil hat on and talk about some conspiracy theories a little bit here. There are a lot of good job openings in the NFL right now, ones that I will talk about in the next segment. One of them being the LA Chargers. Now, I think Colin Cowherd made this comparison. I think a couple of other people do too. Is there a better job necessarily than the one that's open right now in LA? Again, the Chargers are in a dominated market, dominated by the Rams and other teams as well. They're going to want to make, a big splash head coaching hire at the end of the day. Now, who could that be? I could see Bill Belichick potentially at least looking at that job. Now, would he take it? I doubt it. I don't think he's leaving New England anytime soon or anything like that. But at the end of the day, you have to consider it if you're Bill. You have to look at, the fact that they absolutely have a franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert who plays tonight against the Las Vegas Raiders. They have a lot of good guys on that defense. Joey Bosa, Derwin James when he's healthy, great corners, great defensive line, Melvin Ingram if you retain him. Good enough offensive weapons, and you can only draft more, at least on the offensive line. And Justin Herbert looks like a bona fide superstar in the making. So if you're Bill Belichick, the only one that I would necessarily consider, for a potential, head coaching gig and head coaching, avenue would be a team like the Los Angeles Chargers. That's the only place I see Bill Belichick necessarily going if he were to leave the New England Patriots. Again, I don't think it's likely, if I'm being quite honest with you, that he would leave the New England Patriots. But if you have to, if you're Bill Belichick, you have to look at this division. The Bills look absolutely incredible. The Dolphins look absolutely incredible, and they're only on the rise again. The Dolphins are only in year 2 of their rebuild, and they're already competing for, an AFC playoff spot right now. But at the end of the day, there has to be a way for Bill Belichick to either improve this Patriot roster. Again, he's both the GM and the head coach, or he's going to have to look at other opportunities, because we know Bill Belichick is arguably the greatest head coach in sports history, but something he's going to want to add to his resume is at least a championship or something in regards to, away from Brady, that it wasn't just because of Brady that he won anything or won any championships. The Chargers are the only avenue where I can see him doing that. At the end of the day, though, if you're Bill Belichick, you have to know this division is only getting better, specifically if the Jets somehow figure out a way to get a good head coach, and obviously you add Trevor Lawrence to the mix as well. But what could really be beneficial here for them is getting a guy like Matt Stafford, proven veteran quarterback. You don't need to teach him a whole new system. He's worked with bad weapons and before. He's not going to complain about those things. And you have the cap space to add a guy like an Allen Robinson or a Kenny Golladay or a Chris Godwin or something like that. So at the end of the day, that's exactly what I would do if I were Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. The only way that I could potentially see something like that working, him leaving, I should say, is again the LA Chargers. But at the end of the day, go get those weapons. Go get a quarterback. I understand that some of the fans really like Cam. I understand Bill loves Cam's work ethic and everything like that. But at the end of the day, Cam Newton is not getting it done from a throwing perspective as an NFL quarterback. The only thing he's getting it done in regards to right now is running. So at the end of the day, I would 100% involve him in, just trying to, it's hard to say because Cam Newton, I don't want to put this all on Cam. I don't want to blame the entire offensive struggles for the New England Patriots on Cam Newton. It's not all his fault. But at the end of the day, that team is not cutting it from an offensive standpoint. And you can blame the play calling of McDaniels, but he's a proven play caller in this league that does a phenomenal job. And at the end of the day, I'd have to at least consider moving off of him. And especially if he wants a long-term contract, there's plenty of weapons in this draft. There's plenty of weapons in free agency. Do what you have to do, Bill Belichick. Add those offensive weapons, things like that. At the end of the day, I think Bill will stay in New England. I don't think he will, necessarily go anywhere, but if he were to go anywhere, it'd be LA. But to make a long story short, I think he stays, and I think Matt Stafford is a perfect opportunity for both him and New England, for Stafford to get some wins on his resume, and for New England to get a proven NFL quarterback with a proven NFL arm at this point. That's something Cam Newton doesn't have right now. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. On the flip side of this short break, I'm going to be breaking down each and every head coaching opportunity. I'm going to rank them in order of which ones I would take if I were a potential NFL head coaching candidate. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you're a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking everything New England Patriots. Again, my strategy if I were the New England Patriots would be to trade Joe Thuney, the guard, in either a second or third round pick. I'd even consider a future first, maybe not this year's first, maybe a future first, to get a guy in, Matt Stafford, again, a proven quarterback who's had some big time, moments in this league, whether he hasn't, really necessarily won a ton, but you can't really blame Matt Stafford for, the ownership and the management of the Detroit Lions and the lack of weapons as well. But he's put up big numbers with not great weapons in Detroit his entire career. And then I also would like to see the Patriots add a Devontae Smith or draft the Kyle Pitts or even Jamar Chase if they don't, win any more games or something like that. And then hopefully sign a guy like Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, Marvin Jones, some of these guys on the market as well. And then all of a sudden the Patriots could look like a really good team. Speaking of sort of the future, I wanted to rank the openings for head coaches right now in the order, I think, of the jobs that are the most appealing for these guys. I think the Bills offensive coordinator, I'm blanking on his name right now, is a guy who should be able to get a head coaching job fairly quickly. Jim Harbaugh might return to the NFL. I think Eric Bieniemy is the best coordinator in the league right now that hasn't gotten a head coaching job. I am shocked. I thought he should have gotten hired maybe last year at least. You could make the argument even 2 years ago he should have been hired. I think he'll get one right now. So so correct me if I'm wrong, but there appears, at least in my head, to be 8 opportunities that have already been open and they're already searching for them, or I included 2 teams, I believe, that are 3 teams that are expected or at least rumored to be moving off their head coach as well. So let's get it right into it here. Coming in at number 8, the worst head coaching option that will be available, in my opinion, is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're in a small market. They don't have a great roster. What they do have is a ton of draft capital. Now, I put them a little bit below the Lions, who are at 7 here, because I think the Lions have a better roster with Kenny Golladay, but Jacksonville does have a lot of draft capital, and they will be getting Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence. If they get Trevor Lawrence and the Jets somehow win a game or two, they immediately shoot it up to at least top 5, but I don't think they will. I think they'll get Justin Fields, who's a great prospect. I think he's absolutely phenomenal, but I don't think he can carry a Jacksonville franchise that far. Not to mention they're the 3rd best team in their own state, Florida. That defense is not what it used to be, and their roster overall just isn't great. They're not really solidified at any position. It's a full-fledged rebuild. And at the end of the day, if you're going to, commit yourself to 5 years and you don't have quick results in the NFL, you could be fired as soon as after 1 year. Jacksonville is not the job I would take. It's not confirmed that their job will be open, but I would have guessed that Doug Marrone is on the way out at the end of the day, and I think they'll get a whole new GM, president of football operations, and head coach there to coach up Justin Fields and Laviska Shenault and some of these other young guys on the roster, James Robinson as well. They have some pieces, just not a ton, but at the end of the day, it's a good, any head coaching job is a good job. But at the end of the day, I think Jacksonville, in comparison to the other openings, is probably the worst. Again, coming in at number 7 is the Detroit Lions. I think they're going to target a guy like Zach Wilson. You have a guy like Kenny Golladay, some players in that defense, Jeff Okudah potentially afterward. That division is good, not great. The Bears also might be looking for a head coaching opportunity. The Vikings are inconsistent. The Packers are obviously incredible, but who knows how much longer Aaron Rodgers will be playing. So that division could be wide open in the future. Lions have diehard fans. Again, also not a great head coaching opportunity in general, just given the history and everything. But guys like Kenny Golladay, maybe even Matt Stafford / Zach Wilson, Joe Thuney, and some draft capital if you move off of Stafford. I think it's a great opportunity there to get some quick draft capital, and you already have some weapons and some semblance of some defensive players that you can give a young quarterback like Zach Wilson or Matt Stafford if you want to keep him. So coming in at number 7, I have the Detroit Lions. Again, I have them as the 7th best head coaching opportunity, projected to be at least available next year. Coming in at number 6, I have the Chicago Bears. Again, not a ton of playmakers. Allen Robinson could be on the way out. That really hurts that offense. They have some good young players like Mooney and some others. Khalil Mack, of course. It's a good head coaching opportunity. I'm not saying it's bad, but there's just a lot of good jobs out there this year. And I have the Lions coming in at number 7, Lions at 7, Bears, who I'm talking about right now, coming in at number 6. It's not confirmed Matt Nagy's on the way out. Maybe he keeps his job, but I think him and maybe even Pace, the GM as well, could be on the way out relatively soon. It's going to be, interesting to see how that whole situation plays out. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have to give it to, it's so tough, but I think the Bears are the 6th best job right now. If I had to predict, out of all the rankings, the Bears would be number 6 in comparison to some of these other teams. Coming at number 5, I have the Atlanta Falcons. Again, they're a win-now sort of team, at least on the offensive side of the ball. But at the end of the day, I could see them moving off of Matt Ryan for some better defensive players maybe, or some draft capital. Them also getting a young quarterback, potentially, or going after a guy like Sam Darnold. But the Falcons just have so many playmakers on offense that this job is really, really, opening and really, really one that you might want to consider taking if you're an Eric Bieniemy or something like that. Again, the Falcons already have Julio Jones and some of these other guys as well. Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst, Todd Gurley, decent offensive line, and if you already have a veteran quarterback presence locked up long term, a guy you can win with in Matt Ryan, or you can move him off to another team or something like that. So coming in at number 5, I have the Atlanta Falcons. Coming in at number 4, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. This is all because of Joe Burrow, and they also have some pretty good weapons. AJ Green's aging, but Tay Higgins looks like a home run wide receiver draft pick that they had. Joe Mixon's already obviously locked up long term. They have some players on that defense. It's a pretty physical defense. I think they can obviously improve, but once you give Joe Burrow an offensive line, he might be better than both Tua and Herbert, who I've been ranting and raving about all show. Obviously coming off, an injury is not great, but at the end of the day, I think it's still a really good head coaching opportunity to coach Joe Burrow and T. Higgins, and there's not a ton of things you have to do to make that team relatively good is what I'm saying. There's not a ton of things that are required. They just need a better offensive line, some defensive players, but they don't need a complete roster turnover like maybe the Lions or the Jaguars are either doing or need to do in the future. So that's why I have them coming in at number 4. Number 3 of the Houston Texans, all because of Deshaun Watson. Now the downside of this is you don't have a ton of draft capital to sort of try to revamp this roster at all. But at the end of the day, Deshaun Watson is a special type of quarterback. He's a special type of leader as well. Champion in high school, championship in college. And if anyone's going to win a Super Bowl that is on a bad team right now, it's going to be Deshaun Watson. So at the end of the day, I really do believe Deshaun Watson is still a special quarterback in this league. I think he's already a top 10 QB in this league, if not top 5. And I know people are sort of forgetting about him because of the season he's having. Some people are saying, Josh Allen's better than him. I wouldn't go that far. Deshaun Watson is still one of the best quarterbacks in this league, still one of the best young QBs in this league. Already have him locked up long term, so it's going to be appealing for any head coach to know that you already have a quarterback of the future there, and you don't necessarily need to, try to fight and, draft or trade or things like that. That's just something that's already off your chest, because that's the pressure of an organization. If you're a GM or a head coach, or maybe even if you're both, you have to get that franchise quarterback every single time, and that's the number one decision you have to get right. So I think teams that already have an established franchise quarterback are more appealing than some of these other teams. So coming in at number 3, I have the Houston Texans. Good roster, not great. Very fixable problems on the O-line, hopefully, and some of the weapons for Deshaun as well in that defense. But again, Deshaun Watson is the main reason for this. He's such a good quarterback in this league, man. I don't see how there's not a way that you can't consider that job. I think it's a phenomenal one. Coming in at number 2, I have the New York Jets. Again, because of Trevor Lawrence. There is nobody on that team that I would consider keeping long term. Some of these guys, Marcus May maybe, Jamison Crowder maybe. Again, a complete roster turnaround, but they have a lot of draft capital because of the Jamal Adams trade, and they're getting Trevor Lawrence, who I personally believe is a transcending quarterback talent. I think he's up there with Luck, Elway, as some of the greatest quarterback prospects of all time. And I think even if you have a bad roster, he's one of those guys that could carry you to a playoff spot. I really, really do believe that. Again, I think Jim Harbaugh will consider this. I think every head coach should consider this. On top of all that, the New York market's hard to pass up on. Decent ownership. I like Joe Douglas, the GM. I think he stays, but I think Gase is the only one who goes. So if you're a head coach, I think you should definitely consider going to the New York Jets. But again, because of Trevor Lawrence, how much of a special player he is, I think it's just going to be tough to not pass up on him or something like that. So at the end of the day, I think the New York Jets are coming in at number 2 when it comes to head coaching opportunities. And coming in at number 1 is the Los Angeles Chargers. I think they are absolutely in play as the best, or at least easily for me, the best head coaching opportunity out there. They have the quarterback, Justin Herbert. They have a win-now team. If the Chargers just got a good head coach, they could become quite literally contenders in the AFC, up there with the Chiefs, up there with the Bills. These really, really good teams. I think they're going to go after the Bills' offensive coordinator due to the similarities in Josh Allen and Justin Herbert's game. At the end of the day, though, this roster is win now. That quarterback is win now while he's still on the cheap on that rookie contract. Also, the big market, Los Angeles, how can you deny it? Again, I think this is the only opportunity Bill Belichick would consider over the New England Patriots. I don't think he'll do it, obviously, but this is clearly, in my opinion, the number 1 head coaching gig out there. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. On the flip side of this final short break, I should say, top 10 NFL teams. I like to do this once a week. I want to give it to you. Who do I have in the top 10 and why? It's always ever-changing. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this final short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show, and if you're continuing to listen to the show, we really do appreciate it if you are a returning listener. We are back here for the final segment of today's show. I just gave you sort of a ranking system of all the available head coaching opportunities in the NFL next season. Again, I like to think about the future a lot, but for right now, for this segment, I want to give you my present top 10 teams in the NFL. I feel like I'm always always changing this list around. The NFL has been so much fun this year. A lot of teams in the playoff race that aren't on this list. A lot of teams, that have gone up, gone down, have been removed, have been added. This list has been crazy overall. I think you're going to find a couple surprises, specifically at the number 2 spot, and I'll explain why. So let's get right into it here. Coming in at number 10, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, depending on what the Miami Dolphins do. Their schedule looks easier and easier by the day. I think the New England Patriots, I think they should beat them on Sunday, and then after that they have the Raiders next Saturday night, which depends on if the Raiders beat the Chargers or not tonight when you're listening to this, and then they have the Bills the following Sunday, who might not play their starters because their position might be already set. The Ravens need to win out and for a couple of things to happen, or at least win 2 of their games, but at the end of the day, I do think they're the 10 best football team in the league. Again, Lamar Jackson is so special, such a dynamic talent at quarterback. I don't think there's ever been a better athlete there. Their defense is legit, and I think their offense is only getting better by the weeks on coming. They have an easy schedule, so by the end of the year, I do believe they're going to be 11-5, at least 10-6, and I think they're the 10th best team in football, at least right now. So coming in at number 10, I have the Baltimore Ravens. Coming in at number 9, I have the Indianapolis Colts, who are coming off a huge win over the Raiders. Phillip Rivers is hot right now. He looks really, really good. I think he's going to continue to get better this year. I think it's his last year, though, in the NFL, period. I think he's retiring after this year. I just don't know if I can trust this Colts team in the playoffs, but what Jonathan Taylor is doing right now is really interesting. Had sort of a slow start to his rookie campaign, really picked it up the last couple of weeks. Solid Colts team right there, and I think they'll go as far as Phillip Rivers will take them. I think they have good weapons, a great defense, great offensive line. I think they have a solid run game now behind Taylor, Hines, some of those other guys once they get healthy as well. Again, a great offensive line. This Colts team will go as far as Phillip Rivers takes them, and I think right now he is taking them to the 9th best team in football, the Indianapolis Colts. Coming in at number 8, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. They are not that good. I don't care that they're 11-2. They're not that good of a football team. Wouldn't surprise me if they drop their game to the Browns and maybe even another game to end the year. They're not as good as people give them credit for. Don't be surprised if this Steelers team gets bounced in the first round. I know I just harped on them, but at the end of the day, they still are a top 10 team in football. So I have them coming in at number 8, but I don't think they're the best team in their division right now, and that goes to the Cleveland Browns. And yes, they lost that game to the Ravens, but again, that's a coin flip game. Those types of things happen. Baker Mayfield is hot, and he is rolling right now. I think this Browns team is better than people give it credit for. Don't be surprised if they win a couple playoff games. They could upset the Steelers and early on in the playoffs, or the Bills early on in the playoffs, and maybe even give the Chiefs a run for their money, depending on how that pass rush goes. Again, they're the best rushing team in football. I know New England has a lot of good, rushing things, but I think yards per attempt right now, Cleveland's number 1. Nick Chubb might be the best back in the entire league. I think he's the most underrated back in the league right now. So is Kareem Hunt, by the way. And again, Baker Mayfield is rolling right now, and he is dealing with his accuracy, with the zip on his arm, everything like that. So coming in at number 7, I have the Cleveland Browns. But I think they would lose to the Bills, who are my number 6 team. Josh Allen is rolling right now. Again, he has completely reinvented his mechanics and completely reinvented the narrative around his accuracy. He's a completely accurate quarterback now, at least accurate enough. And at the end of the day, the Bills could win a lot of games with this guy. He is a really, really talented dude right now, and he has been absolutely balling. And that Bills defense is legit. I'm just worried for the Bills about the long term, that this is the best we're going to see them after they lose some coordinators and some guys maybe to free agency down the line. But at the end of the day, this Bills team right now this year is absolutely legit. I think they're just outside of the top 5. I almost wanted to put them as high as 3. I went back and forth. I think 1 through 7, really. All of these teams could beat any of these teams. 1 through 7 right now. So the Browns are 7, but I think they could easily be the 3rd best team in the league. The Bills, too, they could obviously be up all the way up to number 2, in my opinion. Maybe even number 1, some people have them. But for me, the Bills are coming in at number 6. For number 5, it's the Tennessee Titans. I'm extremely high on them. Derrick Henry is a baller in the playoffs, and I think I put them at 5 because I know what they do in the playoffs. They have upset a lot of really good teams, the Patriots and the Ravens. So at the end of the day, I know they can level up, and really stick it to the best competition in the league when it comes to playoff time, and maybe that's why I have them coming in at number 5. But at the end of the day, they need to take care of their own division. But their rushing attack is absolutely phenomenal, and I think Ryan Tannehill is a baller. I think he's just a completely different quarterback than what he was in Miami, and he's replicating that success that he had last year into this year. Coming in at number 5, I have the Tennessee Titans. Coming in at number 4, I have the Seattle Seahawks. They are the wild card team. They can honestly win the Super Bowl or get bounced in the first round depending on their defense. They need to get back to what they do best, which is not totally relying on Russell Wilson. They need to be a balanced offense. That's the best when they're at their best, is when they're balanced like that. At the end of the day, will they do that? I'm not sure. They've been so Russ dependent the entire year, but what he's doing with DK Metcalf and some of these other guys is incredible. Again, they can beat anybody, but they can also lose to anybody. They're a wild card team, but I'm putting my faith and trust in Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, guys who I know are proven winners, who have won Super Bowls together. And at the end of the day, that's just where I have them right now. Coming in at number 4, I definitely have the Seattle Seahawks. I totally think they're a top 5 team in football. Coming in at number 3, I have the New Orleans Saints. I think they're the second best team in the NFC. I don't think they're going to come out of it either. This is almost me sort of predicting a little bit in the playoffs too. They choke in the playoffs often. People are figuring out Taysom Hill and Drew Brees. I don't know if he'll be 100% at any point this year. He had a punctured lung and a ton of broken ribs. I don't know if you can ever truly recover from that within a couple months span, and that's what he's going to have to do this entire year now. Play hurt in the playoffs, at least not 100%, which is going to be really, really tough. But at the end of the day, they have an incredible defense. I know they lost to Jalen Hurts, but nobody was really expecting how he was going to play, so I'm going to give them a pass on that. But I think the Saints are still a top 3 team in football, but I don't think they're going to be coming out of the NFC. I think that's going to be the Rams. I really do believe the LA Rams are way better than people give them credit for. Their secondary might be the best in the league. Aaron Donald is always in your face as well, and they pretty much just blitz you and play man coverage, and they're absolutely phenomenal at it. And once the offensive machine, that's the LA Rams offense with Sean McVay and Jared Goff, gets going, it's really hard to stop. When Jared Goff's uncomfortable and blitzed heavy and the offensive line doesn't do a great job, they lose. But more often than not, the machine gets going, and that's how I sort of view their offense, like a machine. It's always scripted, timing, perfect, always, and they're always on par, and they're always on the same page until Jared Goff sort of gets blitzed and a little bit uncomfortable. So at the end of the day, I'm going to have to give it to the LA Rams coming in number 2. I think they're going to go to the Super Bowl in the NFC. And of course, my number 1 team in the entirety of the NFL is the San Francisco 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know why I said San Francisco. The Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes throws 3 interceptions, probably plays the worst game of his career, and they were up 30-10 at a certain point. They're absolutely unstoppable. They're almost like a Golden State Warrior level at this point. At the end of the day, like you can only go up so much without them coming. They'll come back every time. Patrick Mahomes, I think, is 8-1 when they're down by 10 or more. That's an absolute ridiculous stat. He's only getting better. They're only getting better, and he threw 3 picks and they still won, and they were pretty much in control the entire game, which is absolutely crazy to think about. So again, to recap really quick: number 1, Kansas City Chiefs; number 2, LA Rams; number 3, New Orleans Saints; number 4, Seattle; 5, Tennessee; 6, Buffalo; 7, Cleveland; 8, Pittsburgh; 9, the Colts; and 10, the Baltimore Ravens. And I have some teams like, the Dolphins and the Cardinals just missing the cut, probably coming in at 11 and 12 are those 2 teams. That's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, again brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Before I let you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We would appreciate it if you did all 3 of those things. I have been your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I will see you all in the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.